My husband sold my jewelry collection while I was away, grinning, "Your jewels funded my empire," like he'd done me a favor. What he didn't know was I'd hidden tracking devices in every piece. I opened the app and watched the red dots scattered across downtown like breadcrumbs leading to his downfall. "Helen, you're back," Michael said with that self-satisfied smirk as I wheeled my suitcase through the front door. His tone was too casual, too rehearsed. Something was wrong. "I am," I replied cautiously, setting down my bag. The living room looked the same, but Michael's energy was different, electric, like he was barely containing some massive secret. "What's with the grin?" I asked, crossing my arms. "Oh, nothing major," he said, waving dismissively. Then he leaned back against the couch arm, his smile widening. "Well, actually, I suppose you'll find out eventually. I made a brilliant business move while you were gone." My stomach dropped. "What kind of move?" "Your jewelry collection." His voice dripped with satisfaction. "I sold every single piece, and before you get emotional, let me just say, you'll thank me later. Your dusty old jewels just funded my empire." The words hit me like ice water. My jewelry collection. The sapphire ring my grandmother gave me on her deathbed. The diamond tennis bracelet from my mother's wedding day. The vintage Cartier watch I bought myself after my first major promotion at the investment firm. Gone. "What did you just say?" My voice came out dangerously quiet. Michael actually laughed. "I said I sold it, Helen. Do you have any idea what those pieces were worth? Enough to jumpstart a venture that's going to put us on the map. It's brilliant, really." My hands clenched into fists. "You had no right, Michael. That was my jewelry. Do you even realize what you've done?" He rolled his eyes like I was being dramatic. "Oh, come on. It's not like you wore half of it, just sitting there collecting dust when it could be building something useful." What Michael didn't know, what made his smug confidence so infuriating, was exactly how wrong he was about me being careless. "I'm Helen Parker, Senior Portfolio Analyst at Meridian Capital Management. I don't do anything without strategic planning. 3 months ago, after a string of high-end burglaries in our neighborhood, I'd taken precautions. Every piece worth over $2,000 now had a micro GPS tracking device embedded in the clasp or setting. It cost me $3,400 to have them professionally installed, but given that my collection was worth over $180,000, it seemed like reasonable insurance. I forced my expression to stay neutral, hiding the storm brewing inside. "I see. And where exactly did you sell them?" "Various places," he said vaguely. "High-end dealers, private collectors. Don't worry about the details. I got top dollar." I nodded slowly, my mind already shifting into analytical mode. This wasn't just theft. This was stupidity. Michael had no idea he'd just handed me a complete evidence trail of his crime. That night, while Michael celebrated his business triumph with expensive whiskey, I sat in my home office staring at my phone screen. The tracking app showed a dozen red dots scattered across the city. My emerald earrings were at Prestige Consignment on 5th Street. The diamond bracelet had moved to Henderson Auction House. The Cartier watch was already at some private residence in the hills. Each dot represented not just a piece of my history, but a crime Michael had documented for me. I pulled up my contact list and found Diana Foster, my former law school roommate who now ran a white-collar defense practice downtown. We'd maintained our friendship over the years, and I knew she'd handled several high-profile theft cases. "Diana, it's Helen. I need legal advice on a theft situation." "Personal or professional?" she asked, immediately alert. "Very personal. My husband sold my jewelry collection without permission while I was traveling. We're talking about pieces worth over $180,000 total." There was a pause. "Helen, that's not a marital dispute. That's felony theft. Are we talking about joint property or items that were specifically yours?" "Specifically mine. Inherited pieces, items I purchased before marriage, gifts from family members. I have documentation proving individual ownership of every piece. And you have evidence he took them? I looked at my phone screen with its glowing red dots. Better than that. I have real-time GPS tracking of where they are right now. Diana's voice sharpened with professional interest. You embedded tracking devices? When? 3 months ago, after the Riverside District burglaries. Every piece over $2,000 has a micro GPS device. I'm literally watching them move through the city in real time. Helen, this is going to be the strongest theft case I've seen in years. We're talking about documented premeditation on your part to protect your assets, clear evidence of unauthorized sale, and real-time location data. How much did you say the total was worth? $186,000 based on recent appraisals. The vintage Cartier alone was $34,000. And your husband has no legal claim to any of it? None. I can prove individual ownership of every piece through purchase receipts, insurance documentation, and inheritance papers. I've maintained separate insurance policies on all of it. Diana was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear her lawyer brain calculating. Helen, your husband isn't just looking at theft charges. If he sold items across state lines or used any federal systems, we're talking about federal violations. Wire fraud if he used electronic transfers. This could be multiple felonies. The full scope of Michael's stupidity was becoming clear. In his rush to fund his empire, he'd committed crimes that could land him in federal prison. What's our first step? I asked. Document everything tonight. Screenshots of the tracking data with timestamps. Gather all your ownership documentation. We'll file charges first thing tomorrow morning. And Helen, don't let on that you know where the items are. The element of surprise is crucial here. After hanging up, I spent 3 hours creating what I privately called the case files. Screenshots of every tracking location with timestamps, insurance appraisals for each piece, purchase receipts going back 15 years, inheritance documentation from my grandmother's estate, bank records showing my personal funds used for purchases. By the time I finished, I had a 47-page evidence package that would make any prosecutor salivate. Michael thought he was building an empire, but he'd actually constructed his own prison sentence. The next morning, while Michael slept off his celebration, I met Diana at the downtown precinct. Detective Blake looked skeptical until Diana laid out the evidence package on his desk. Mrs. Parker, I've been working theft cases for 12 years, he said, flipping through the documentation. I've never seen anything this comprehensive. You have real-time GPS tracking of stolen goods? I showed him my phone screen. The emerald earrings are still at the consignment shop. The diamond bracelet moved to a new location overnight, probably sold to a private buyer. Detective Blake was practically grinning. This is incredible. We can coordinate with the DA's office to recover the items while building the criminal case. How much are we talking about total? $186,000 confirmed value, Diana answered, which puts this squarely in felony territory. Multiple felonies, Blake corrected. If he sold items to buyers in different counties, that's conspiracy. Wire fraud if he used electronic payments, and depending on the buyers, potentially violations of federal commerce laws. I felt a grim satisfaction settle over me. Michael's brilliant business move was about to destroy his entire future. What about recovery of the items? I asked. With this tracking data, we can coordinate with the businesses involved. Most legitimate dealers will cooperate fully when they realize they've purchased stolen goods. We should be able to recover at least 70 to 80% of the items within a week. The next few days unfolded like a carefully orchestrated investigation. Detective Blake coordinated with the DA's office, while Diana handled the legal strategy. The GPS tracking proved invaluable. We could see exactly which items were still at retail locations versus which had moved to private buyers. Prestige Consignment immediately cooperated when contacted by police. They'd purchased 4 pieces from Michael for $28,000, far below their actual $67,000 value. The owner, Mrs. Washington, was furious when she realized she'd been used to fence stolen goods. "Your husband claimed they were inherited family pieces he needed to sell quickly for medical bills," she told me when I came to retrieve them. "He seemed so sincere. I'm so sorry this happened to you." Henderson Auction House was equally cooperative. They'd featured my diamond tennis bracelet in their upcoming catalog, marketed as estate jewelry from private collection. When Detective Blake explained the situation, they immediately pulled the piece and provided all documentation of their dealings with Michael. The most satisfying recovery came from Goldstone Galleries, an upscale jewelry store where Michael had sold my most valuable pieces. The owner, David Goldstone, had paid Michael $89,000 for items actually worth $134,000. "I knew the prices seemed too good to be true," Mr. Goldstone admitted, "but he had convincing documentation and seemed very knowledgeable about the pieces." What he meant was that Michael had stolen my insurance appraisals and used them to convince buyers the items were legitimately his. This added document fraud to his growing list of charges. Within 6 days, we'd recovered $162,000 worth of jewelry. The remaining $24,000 in pieces had been sold to private buyers who were harder to track, but Detective Blake was confident those would be recovered through the ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, Michael remained oblivious. He'd been spending his days at coffee shops, supposedly networking for his new business venture. I watched him come home each evening, still glowing with satisfaction about his brilliant move. "How's the empire building going?" I'd ask casually. "Excellent," he'd reply. "Just waiting for some final paperwork to clear, then we'll really see things take off." The paperwork he was waiting for was the federal indictment that would destroy his life. On Thursday morning, Detective Blake called with an update. "Mrs. Parker, we're ready to move forward with charges. The DA's office has reviewed everything and they're filing multiple felony counts: grand theft, fraud, conspiracy, and federal wire fraud charges." "When will you arrest him?" "This afternoon. We wanted to give you a heads up in case you preferred not to be home when it happens." I considered this carefully. Part of me wanted to see the look on Michael's face when reality finally crashed down on him. But the strategic part of my mind recognized that being present could complicate things legally. "I'll be at my office," I decided. "But Detective Blake, make sure he understands exactly what evidence you have. I want him to know his brilliant move was actually the stupidest thing he's ever done." That afternoon, I was in a client meeting when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "They arrested me. This is insane. Call my lawyer." I deleted it without responding. Diana called an hour later. "It's done. He's in custody and being processed. The DA filed 6 separate counts, and bail is set at $250,000. Will he make bail? Doubtful. His assets are frozen pending investigation, and I'm guessing he doesn't have access to that kind of cash legitimately. She was right. That evening, I received a call from Michael's mother asking if I could help with bail money. I politely explained that given the charges against him for stealing my property, I wouldn't be providing any financial assistance. The next few weeks revealed the full scope of Michael's devastating miscalculation. The local newspapers picked up the story. Local man arrested for stealing wife's $186,000 jewelry collection. His business associates began distancing themselves. His empire-building network evaporated overnight. More damaging was the federal investigation that Diana had predicted. Because Michael had used electronic transfers and crossed state lines in his sales, federal prosecutors decided to make an example of the case. Wire fraud charges carried potential sentences of up to 20 years. Michael's court-appointed attorney reached out to Diana about a plea deal, but the evidence was so overwhelming that prosecutors had little incentive to negotiate. Your tracking system and documentation make this an unwinnable case for him, Diana explained. They have him dead to rights on every single charge. The final blow came when I received the recovered jewelry from evidence storage. Each piece had been professionally cleaned and documented as part of the investigation. My grandmother's sapphire ring sparkled exactly as it had when she placed it on my finger 20 years ago. As I clasped the tennis bracelet around my wrist, the one my mother wore on her wedding day, I realized that Michael's empire had lasted exactly 11 days. From the moment he made his first sale to his arrest had been less than 2 weeks, but the consequences of those 11 days would follow him for the rest of his life. I filed for divorce while he was still in custody, awaiting trial. Diana handled the paperwork, ensuring that all marital assets were properly divided and that Michael's legal troubles couldn't impact my financial security. The beauty of this situation, Diana explained, is that his criminal acts provide clear grounds for fault-based divorce. You won't owe him anything, and his legal fees aren't your responsibility. 6 months later, Michael pled guilty to 4 felony counts in exchange for a reduced sentence of 3 years in federal prison, plus 5 years probation. His brilliant business move had cost him his marriage, his freedom, and his future earning potential as a convicted felon. I kept one memento of the whole experience, a screenshot from the tracking app showing all those red dots scattered across the city. I had it printed and framed in my office, a reminder that preparation and strategic thinking will always triumph over arrogance and impulsiveness. My jewelry collection, now safely secured in a proper vault, had not only been fully recovered but had taught me the most valuable lesson of all. Never underestimate someone who plans 3 moves ahead. Michael's empire lasted 11 days. My victory will last a lifetime.